Teams and on Facebook, and on 3 different pages on Facebook. The Supranational Democracy page, the Euractiv page, and finally the Jean Monnet House page. So we are very good. We have a coverage. We can say we are coverage. So thank you all for being here, and I'm very honored to open the works of this 5th edition of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. This is a special one because it's the 5th, because it's also the first in partnership with Jean Monnet House and Democracy and Culture Foundation. And we have also many other partners like the European Democracy Lab or the G100 or the Democracy Without Borders, the Democracy School. We have plenty of partners, and this makes us specifically proud to be here today. And I will bring also the greetings from the rector of Unisalento del Salento, who unfortunately cannot be with us because he's busy abroad. So let me welcome also on behalf of the whole University of Salento. I will start giving directly the floor to Anthony Keifalas from the Democracy and Culture Foundation. And we have to share the screen. No, from here. You have to share from here so people from home will be able. Okay. Share. Do you see on the screen?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. And I thank myself, the organizers, for inviting us. The Democracy and Culture Foundation is a new foundation. It was created 3 years ago, and it's the people who have been running for the last 10 years the Athens Democracy Forum in association with the New York Times. We decided, however, 3 years ago that it was better to have an overall, let's say, mother company that would do other things except the Athens Democracy Forum, the conference, and the Art for Tomorrow. And so the Democracy and Culture Foundation is now running a number of projects, and of course one of these is our association with Susanna here, and the idea of supranational democracy, because it's one of the basic projects that we are running as well. I don't want to bother you with too much with what we're doing and with what we believe, but I thought that I would say that basically we look at democracy as standing at the nexus of culture and identity. And we look at democracy as being a process. It is not an end product. So how you design the process is extremely important. Exactly because of the conditions in which we live today. Finally, I wanted to say that for us, there is no ethical relativism in democracy. You either have liberal democracy or you do not. Now, basically, as you can see, we're running 2 conferences and a number of projects, and we have a special team that is designing new projects. The projects are, very briefly, Democracy Catching Up with Technology, which was a series of expert roundtables that ended up by designing specific policy recommendations. That led to the digital toolkit, which is a number of deliberative democracy tools that can be used by the governments in order to increase participation of citizens. We are running a climate hub, which is regional, interactive, and aims to inform local authorities in the southeastern Mediterranean area about about what are the actions that are being taken and how these actions can come together in order to create economies of scale. And also we're looking at how national directives come down to local authorities and the problems that they face in actually implementing national directives on climate. We have created a curated library which is on our site on democracy. We are in the process, that's number 6, of creating a new conference which is exclusively for teenagers, 13 to 18, and it will be a conference which is going to be run by them. We will organize it, but they will run it, they will decide on the issues and how to handle them. And this year we've got the first pilot project with something like 40 to 50 teenagers from all over the world coming to Athens in September to meet in parallel with the Athens Democracy Forum, which lasts for 2 days. Actually, yeah, it starts on Wednesday afternoon on the 27th and ends on the 29th on Friday afternoon. And a major program that we're running is the Building Blocks of Democracy, which is a global project. It is taking place in 10 cities across the world. Sydney, Seoul, Tel Aviv, Bogota, Kenya, Berlin, Washington, Prague, Bucharest, and Athens. It's in the second year, and the aim of this project, which started off by creating an academic base on how democracy functions, is to design specific policy, not general policies like, fight transparency. Yeah, fight non-transparency. No, it is specific policies on the issues that have been identified on how to make democracy more resilient. It's not theoretical, and when I will talk about this later, I can mention, if there are any questions, exactly what it is that we're doing. That's all I can say for now, because I don't want to take any more time. Susanna, thank you, and thank you all of you for coming here and for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for stating in your introduction some basic points about democracy, and this is really getting immediately into the topic. And let me get to the other important partner. Mario, please join us at the table. Important partner that we have with us today, who is the Jean Monnet House, and Marti Grau-Segou, the curator and head of service of the Jean Monnet House, European Parliament. And I'm very pleased to give him the floor. Marti, I have to ask to which place with Anthony, so you can see us online. Okay. Let me tell you that Marti and the Jean Monnet House hosted a big team from Unisalento in April, on 5 and 6 April, for a workshop on supranational democracy, European democracy model and citizen participation. And it was an exciting experience, which ended with a declaration published on 9 May on the website of the Jean Monnet House, and declaring what deliberative democracy is for us and should be for us. So I'm very pleased and honored.
Thank you very much. I was ready to say a few words in Italian, because since we're at the beginning of the conference, and it's about thanking also all the organizers. So if you allow me, I will say a couple of sentences in Italian, and then I will do the rest of my short, I promise, presentation in English. Vorrei ringraziare gli organizzatori di questa importante riunione, di questo importante evento, l'Università del Salento, particolarmente la professoressa Susanna Cafarò, la provincia e anche il governo dell'Università del Salento per questa questa opportunità non soltanto di essere qui con voi, ma per questo fantastico convegno che abbiamo organizzato, come la professoressa Caffaro ha appena detto, alla Casa Jean Monnet qualche settimana fa. È stata un'esperienza veramente importante dal punto di vista della discussione, e poi c'è stata questa dichiarazione firmata da tanti accademici, di tante persone, ricercatori, ma anche diciamo chiaramente attivisti per la democrazia europea. Quindi speriamo che alla Casa Jean Monnet possiamo anche diventare una sede, diciamo una doppia sede, una sede alternativa per questi incontri. Speriamo che in anni successivi ritornerà questa riunione. Noi siamo sempre lieti di accogliervi, e grazie ancora dell'invito oggi per essere qua. I speak in English now. Well, I was basically just saying that we're very happy about this cooperation between the Jean Monnet House, University of Salento. The Jean Monnet House is a historical site owned by the European Parliament since 40 years ago. So it's actually the very first building that the European Parliament and any European institution ever acquired. So it's quite symbolic that this humble place where Monet, Jean Monnet, one of the fathers of Europe, for some, the father of Europe, lived, that it was the very first building before any big office building in Strasbourg, Brussels, or Luxembourg. And it was, I have to say it was an Italian former president of the European Parliament who was behind the initiative of buying that house. So Emilio Colombo. So, well, here's a possible connection between the storytelling of the Jean Monnet House and your beautiful country. There are many others, including the fact that Jean Monnet's wife was Italian. But okay, I'll stop there with the connections between countries. I would like to underline two main ideas because we don't have time for more right now. About the content, going into the business of this conference. I think when we look at the work of the founding fathers, not just Monet, but I'm thinking also about Altiero Spinelli, we've been quite active with supporting and accompanying many initiatives regarding Altiero Spinelli with Italian partners and others at the European level. And we realized that two things at least, and now I'll stop there, I promise. One is that in the case of Spinelli, it's quite clear that the fight for democracy, the fight for values, etc. But in the case of other founding fathers, including Jean Monnet, there's this the really widespread vision that they were not that interested in democracy. They were technocratic. They were like gray men behind desks with paperwork all day, and basically they didn't have such interesting lives. So that is really, really far from the reality. In the case of Jean Monnet, we can see that he had a very adventurous life. He was very, very influential from very early on, very young at the age 26 until his passing away at age 19. And it was a commitment for Europe, yes, but a commitment for the world and for democracy and for understanding worldwide. His first idea was to simply work for common interest, just to help people identify common interest and to work towards that goal. It was very simple and very complicated at the same time. Very simple to come up with this really important idea, but quite difficult to implement it. But Monet was really attached to the idea of democracy in the European institutions, and to make sure that at the end of the road, or well, not really at the end because really there's no end, but down the road, European institutions would become fully democratic, and that there would be direct democratic elections one day. And he actually died 3 months before the first democratic elections. but he knew that that was going to happen, and that's why basically he thought, well, it's a good moment to go in a way because there's a new generation. Second idea, and I finish, is the idea of the border. Of many founding fathers, actually, they thrived because they were people, or in part because they were people from the border. In the case of Jean Monnet, it was really the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, his border in Charente, but it was a border that actually doesn't divide but unites with what is beyond. In this case, with the Atlantic world, with the UK, with the United States, with Canada. So here we have this transnational scope of his work. I'm not going into details, but if we look at De Gasperi, also a person from the border, if we look at Adenauer, if we look at Schumann, and even if we look at Spinelli in Ventotene, well, he had this border that was the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, but that in Ventotene in prison, that allowed him to precisely to be in contact with other people, including Albanian inmates in prison who worked with him in this Federalist Manifesto, setting the foundations for European unity. So again, the border was inspiring, and the border led to very positive things in terms of democratic change and vision for the future. So mi fermo qui e mi auguro soltanto che questo magnifico confine che abbiamo qua, il mare Mediterraneo, ci porti a dei frutti abbondanti nella nostra discussione e che possiamo ritrovarci in anni successivi, come avevo detto all'inizio. Grazie.
So, thank you very much. This idea of the border is very inspiring because, as Marty just said, we are on a border, and it's quite a challenging border because it's not only, as we are used to thinking, Brindisi, the border with Greece and Albania is the border with the whole Mediterranean, and it's quite a challenging border. I'm very honored to have with me now Professor Mariano Longo, Head of Department of Human and Social Sciences, and I give him the floor.
Benvenuti in Italian. I know the official language of the conference is English, but it's nice to say hello in Italian to all of those who come from abroad anyway. A couple of brief ideas about this conference. The first one is connected to the reason why I'm here as a head of the Department of Human and Social Sciences, so nothing to do with law, or at least not the main topic in my department. Okay, the other reason is I'm a good friend of Susanna, but it's actually incidental anyway. The main question about the number of problems which we are facing in contemporary society are all connected with the necessity of a global or a supranational treatment of those problems. Otherwise, they would be impossible to solve or to tackle anyway. We have a long established tradition by which we think about societies in terms of a national state. Of course, this idea has been, in a sense, dismissed by sociologists as well as by social scientists in general, including law scientists. But this conference is actually of great interest for social scientists as well as sociologists, because it deals with the questions we are going to face from a supranational perspective. There is no other perspective, actually, because we are not able to deal with environmental problems, migration, economic problems and all the rest of it without assuming a global or supranational perspective. The other element which is of great interest for me as a sociologist is that this conference is a very intelligent combination of academic thinking and the civic society, which is actually unusual in the sense that we are used to talking with and about ourselves often as scholars. And in connection with what I was saying before, that is the number of problems and the consistency of the problems we're facing, it's actually a very important element, combining academic thinking and the energy coming from citizenship, actually, from those who are in the situation, we actually are all in the situation of suffering from the problems I was mentioning before. But since the problems we're facing are common, we have to actually dismiss the idea that the intellectuals, the scholars, are the ones who have a ready-made solution for very complex and global, unusual, new, complicated questions. So thanks a lot to Susanna. Thanks to all of us, all of you. I was saying all of us, including me in the conference, actually. I hope it will be an interesting, profuse, and interesting conference. I'm sure it will be. Thanks a lot.
Here with us today. And now I give the floor to Anna Chiara Stefanucci, who is here in representation of the Europe Direct Talent. Please, Anna Chiara, come here by my side. So we have also a branch of the European Commission here with us, we can say. Thank you, Professor. I first of all would like to thank the University of Salento, in the persons especially of Professor Caparo and Professor Morini, I saw over there, for the invitation, which represents a further step in such a fruitful cooperation with the University of Salento, between the Europe Direct Talent and the University of Salento, which dates back to 2021, I think, and it's a cooperation which brings an added value also to our mission as a Europe Direct Talent, which is an information center for those who do not know on European policies, programs, which is part of a broad network of 425 centers all around Europe, which is coordinated, directly coordinated by the European Commission. And 45 are the centers in Italy, and 3 of them for the Apulia region. We have the Europe Direct Center of Bari, of BAT, and since a couple of years, we joined the Europe Direct family. Talking of democracy, what's the contribution of a Europe Direct Center in the promotion of European democracy or European citizenship? We work on a territorial basis, and we act, as Professor Cavaro was saying, as a branch of the European Commission, territorial basis, and we can say that we engage with citizens, we organize information activities, and in this way we ensure a greater ownership of the European project, and at the same time
we enable citizens to make more informed choices about the future they want on the EU. We push them somehow to participate more in the European democratic life by, for example, cultivating a better understanding on the functioning of the EU, on the functioning of the mechanism of the EU institutions. We raise citizens' awareness also on what they can get from the EU in terms of opportunities, on what are the policies that are concerned with their territories, for example. And most importantly, at least in my opinion, we always try to draw a conjunction line between the macro EU priorities, policies, programs, and the local needs. So this is what we try to do also while applying for the call for proposal of the European Commission for the selection of new Europe Direct Centers in the Commission, that there was an important need of getting into contact between the Taranto area, of course, but the south of Apulia in general, and the EU institutions. As a Europe Direct Center in Taranto, we are a new generation center in the sense that we were selected, as I was saying, 2 years ago, and we will be active until 2025. And we perform some tasks that are providing information in general on the EU policies and programs, for example, the Next Generation EU, EU Green Deal, Repower EU, and so on. We work a lot with the schools, and especially we organize information sessions, trainings, but we also support projects for the promotion of European citizenship. For example, we are very active in the project known as School of Open Coesione, which is a project of civic monitoring of the expenditure on structural funds at territorial level, which is done by the students. So while playing to be journalists, students acquire important competencies in terms of, for example, data journalism, project management, communication management, and so on. We also establish important relations with local media and multipliers to counterfeit the EU disinformation, and we also provide technical contents to journalists to write articles related to EU policies. For example, being in Taranto, we often are called and requested to provide information on Just Transition Fund, EU Green Deal, and so on. And especially we organize public debates. Since our start, we organized more than 30 public debates, 20 debates and meetings with schools. And talking about dialogue, and I will close with examples. We organized an important citizens dialogue. It was just 3 days ago in Taranto. We had the chance to host the first vice president of the European Commission, Franz Timmermans, who was with us for a citizens dialogue that we organized in a theater, which was open to all Taranto citizenship, but also to people from everywhere in Apulia. And the commissioner directly replied to questions and concerns by the citizens. So this was a very concrete example on how a dialogue between the EU institutions and the territory can be played through the contribution of but in general of Europe Direct Center. So thank you very much. We of course are at your disposal. We are based in Taranto, as I was saying, with a physical corner, but we are available through our website and social channels for any requests, and always available on the territory also for taking part to other initiatives in Puglia. Thank you very much.
You can stay here, and you can see there is a good reason for having a Europe Direct, because it's an example of institutions close to citizens through specific antennae, specific offices intended to foster the dialogue with citizens. So just to say, it's not all that bad, the Union. There are things that people don't know or underestimate, and there are policies designed also to take the citizens in. Point is, often citizens don't even know that they have such tools. So this is another side of the problem. Now, I close the reading session. The president of province will be with us, but he told me that it could be late, so he invited me to go with the program, and of course when he will show up, we will have his greetings later. So I thank you, and we now move to the next session. And please, Valérie, Mar, join me at the table together with Jan. And after we will have the intervention from Federico Bonomi and Lazar Zivanic, but I will invite them to use the other mic, which is there. Yes, you start, and I'm especially pleased to have Valérie Sento starting this session. Valérie is an old friend, not because she's old, but because the friendship is very long friendship, and an amazing person, and I love the idea of having her framing the discourse today. Lazar, yes, you can. Federico, you can take a chair. Sorry, we don't have enough chairs. The idea was having you two intervening at the podium. Fine for you. Okay. Is on the screen the presentation? Okay, perfect. So Valérie is also a professor. He's not only a lawyer in the European Central Bank, he's also a professor. And you will see how interesting things she teaches. So we leave you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Susanna. And I'm sure that the gathering after will be an opportunity to expand on our long friendship. So today I wanted to bring a little bit a dimension that we lawyers tend to neglect because we are text-based people. We tend to think quite linear, and the world and even our own brain, so that's a physical reality, is essentially visual. So modern technology, AI, is based on coding, decoding, understanding our visual cortex. So I think we'd better also take a little bit care of framing, shaping, and influencing the visual public sphere. And that's a little bit what I would want to propose to you, to reflect together how mindless visual communication can affect, not to say impact negatively democracy, but of course every poison is at the same time an antidote. So let's see what we can do, because we need to think a bit about it, get into the topic, and maybe propose 3 solutions at the end. I want to take basically 2 examples. The infamous Brexit bus, which was a visual that has had an enormous impact on the votes of people in Britain. And then green finance, the visual narrative that are being used and that are mesmerizing us, and that we need to kind of explore a little bit in order to really appreciate. But why do we want to care? I just want to do a little mini short experiment with you, how insignificant and how fundamental visual communication is. Stop war, peace now, I guess we all agree and we all feel comfortable and confident. But the very same words, the very same color, just a little twist, and everything changes. Stop peace, war now. So when we start to appreciate and realize how minor intervention direct our attention, and we are in an attention economy where the myth goes that we have an attention span of 6 seconds, you understand that grabbing attention, but on top keeping it and even more directing it is quite at the heart of shaping the public sphere. Therefore, caring for our visual perception and not just seeing visual communication as something for the designer or the com team to put a bit of decoration and to be a bit, let's say, casual about you have a keyword and then you just put a picture to it, how underestimated and neglected, dangerously neglected that aspect of the public discourse is. So what we really need to do is to go and embrace a number of aspects. I don't want to expand overly, I think we can come back to that, but just to know that, like, philosophically, I rely very much on the analytics of Roland Barthes from a philosophical perspective, but I'm also very impressed by the literature around image politics, in particular in climate activism, but also in political campaigns. Before, when I made the proposal to come, this picture had not already been viral on the net, so I had to add a few pictures. And actually, it helped me try out a not yet established, academically established, because I've not done yet the data collection, but a taxonomy of visual semiotics. So these ones, I call them AI-generated photographs, and they are my type 1. They are intentionally fake, but at first sight, the intent is hidden. So at first sight, when you look at it, nobody says anywhere that this is fake, and for a couple of hours, it had its fame and it had its impact. And from there on, you have all sorts of misunderstanding and traction on public consciousness, from conspiracy to declaration of big fake to all sorts of confusion. And the world is loud enough. Every time we add noise, we don't create more symphony, we create more cacophony. And that we really need to be mindful about. But interestingly enough, in the very same time frame, the last few weeks, Amnesty International used AI-generated photos, intentionally fake, same intention, but explicit, with an explicit intent. So it did mention on the picture to denounce violence in Colombia, that basically the picture were AI-generated. And of course comes zillion of ethical question and conversation about the use of that in an intentional way. I don't have a solution yet, but I do think that's my type 2, so intentionally fake, same as type 1. The difference is intent is implicit in type 1 and intent is explicit in type 2. I meant to discuss with you today only type 3, which is over-realistic, but yet also confusing. Why? Because when you use a photography, and that's established by scholars, there is a cognitive bias of veracity and realism. So when we see something on a photograph, we tend to take it, in the vast majority of the cases, for representing reality. And there, because the picture of the Brexit bus was on top in combination with quantities, we have a second cognitive bias, which is we tend to believe that quantities which are, let's say, published are real or verifiable. So when you start to accumulate layers of dissentful intention, you end up in such a complex layering that to deconstruct it, it takes a lot of blah blah. So it takes 1 second to broadcast the confusion, and it takes minutes, if not hours, if not weeks, to deconstruct it and to prove that it is inaccurate. So if you want to read, I published an article on that. I don't go in further detail, and I'm of course open to question. On the other side, you have the visual narrative about greening whatever. in that case, greening the finance. I've also, 2 weeks ago, another article published on that, not to self-promote, but just to say that if you want much more detail, you are very welcome to go and consult. And basically there is a number of problems, because we say that public institutions are losing traction and are losing public trust. But I see an issue with broadcasting photographs that do not represent reality. So if we, for instance, publish the globe, the earth, all in green, that we know with beautiful pictures of the European Space Agency, that it's not representing reality. So even public institutions mislead themselves and the public they talk to on an aspect that is totally not necessary. And then when we look at finance, we start to see, I don't know, if you have such a garden, I buy your house, where when you pull green, you have coins under. I've never seen that in any of my 3 gardens. So I have really an allergy to kind of, a similar picture, this one I made in my own garden for copyright reasons. But I think we have a duty, when in particular from public institutions, to make sure that we kind of inform also visually with facts and not with fallacies. So these are the sort of thoughts that I think we need to look at a little bit more in detail. Another question, but that's more for natural scientists than political scientists, but at the same time, it's interesting, we want to green a blue planet, so it feels as if we want to live on a flat earth, to me. But that's a very big debate, and I just find it very interesting to kind of go at the meta level and really critically rethink, and not just say, if we want to green the finance, which is a totally virtuous, needed and urgently needed perspective from, let's say, the economical view of it and the benevolence towards Mother Earth. But I don't think we mean it literally. It's not that we want to put green where there is mainly blue. It's just a metaphor. But if we accumulate metaphor of a metaphor, we can really wonder, are we assessing the problem accurately? And are we working towards the adequate goal, or are we wasting a lot of intelligence and energy on fallacies? So that these are the type of conversation that populating the public sphere with visuals which are not helping grow the educational level and the understanding of an already complex sort of themes, that it is AI that we anthropomorphize with robots as visual, or that it is the sort of political campaign that we are broadcasting quantities that do not exist, or photographs that are misleading, is really tricky. And that's why I am at the moment trying to research how to thematize the intention of the messenger between positive and negative, hidden and transparent. You see how I have spread the few examples that I have presented today, and how basically defining intention as what one is motivated to accomplish is really a big part of what we need to look into. And I save the legal trouble that this brings with the theory of appearance. But there is really a lot of research, well warranted, but maybe that is taking too long. So let me go to solution time and propose 3 solutions. Solution 1, that we shall, in particular us as lawyers, who are the glue in society and intervene across the entire democratic spectrum, from lawmaking, interpretation, advising, conflict resolution, and more. We really need to appreciate that if on top of our extremely interesting analytical skills and conceptual and abstraction skills, we would also pay attention to visually represent our reasoning and be really broadcaster and messenger of clarity and reliable visual information, we could have a huge impact. because as you see, a curved line with every point at equal distance from the center is no other things than a circle. You can choose not to read, but you cannot choose not to see. So you can save reading the 3 sentences on half of the screen, but generally the circle comes across to your retina, providing you are able to see. So just to, second solution for me is we have like every balancing moments, every moment has a pendulum effect, so maybe we were not enough emotional and empathetic some years ago in the public discourse. We've gone full blast on the other side and potentially overbloated the pathos in the discourse. So we need to really look and be very sensitive to the fact that designing and visualizing information accompanying text is a great opportunity to exactly really bring more ethics, keep pathos on hold, or let's say the right doses to connect and establish the hard connection, because we need that in order to have traction and impact, but at the same time have a duty of realism and reasoning, in particular if we are a public institution, a university, a business school, a financial institution, an NGO. So not every stakeholder can be brought into that logic, even though I think it should be part of ESG, CSR, and so on, of also private company. But if the public sector and entities that have a public mission or that have high exposure and high traction on the public sphere should definitely consider very much taking care of that, so that democracy does not lose its D, and that we don't glide into an emocracy, so the ruling of emotion over the other polarities of this golden triangle. The last solution is less fake photography and more educational graphics. I think this is relatively embarrassing to see so many incredibly beautiful institutions propagating fallacies involuntarily, because I've made the test. Many people did not realize until they were kind of put the nose on it. So I think there is a lot of space. We are in the era of education, entertainment, edutainment. Let's turn the poison in an antidote, and let's make it a duty to propagate reliable visuals. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And as I was saying, she's perfect for framing the conversation. And now we have a better understanding of how our communication works. And I pity all of us because we don't have pictures to explain what we mean. But it was really very interesting. Okay, and now I have the pleasure to introduce Tiziana Stella, who is unfortunately not with us. Dr. Tiziana Stella is the director of the Straight Council for a Council of No, Tiziana will talk from online. Okay, so okay, next will come in Mar, but I think we can first have the talk with Tiziana. Tiziana, are you online? Unfortunately, Tiziana Stella couldn't come to be with us today. She's in the United States, so it's 3 a.m. there, and it's a heroic this attempt to be with us. Just a moment. Tiziana, are you with us? Can you unmute you and open the camera? Voila. It's beautiful to see you. Pity you are not with us, and thanks for making this huge effort of skipping the night for being with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's may I call the technician? Yeah, just a moment, because we need amplification. No, It's okay. It's okay. Si sente poco. Come colleghiamo Teams al microfono?
Riuscite a sentirmi?
Yes, yes, now we can. You have maybe to raise a bit the voice. Could you say something? Maybe we can. Possiamo aumentare il volume?
Is it on my end?
Okay. Do you hear from there? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you can talk now.
Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So thank you, Susanna, and everyone involved in organizing the conference. Now, I seem to be awake, but here is like 4:18 a.m. So forgive me, maybe there is a little bit of incoherence in my presentation. Hopefully, you can hear me well. So the title of my presentation is A Global Public Sphere, including tensions and factions on the one side against the interdependence of democracy and truth. There is a stark contrast between the theme of this panel, an inclusive public sphere beyond borders, and today, concrete concern with the potential of societal collapse. And yet, both perspectives and processes are at play as we talk. So what I believe is that one of the dynamics that is often unaddressed and that is critical to understanding the tension between these two realities is the role that knowledge censorship played and continues to play in defining the boundaries of the politically possible. In other words, there has never been a lack of alternative designs of institutions and communities or lack of public support. I am an historian, so my field is specifically the debate on world organization. And it is, does it work? Yeah. And it is obvious that both during World War I and World War II, there were alternative designs of institutions that would have been better adapted to the changes that had intervened in the world. There was public support for such change, but the role of censorship and the role of factions and special interests played a great part in preventing the emergence of these changes. So, to summarize, so ever since the first industrial revolution, our institutions have become increasingly maladjusted, they are too fragmented, and too defined by the point of view of specific interests. By the fourth industrial revolution, the primacy of technological causation and political fragmentation started to challenge our collective capacity with simultaneous crisis. I hear on it, is that everything okay? Yes. Just on my end. But also a fragmented international and global system is of course incompatible with democracy and truth because ultimately it is shaped by different degrees of censorship and gatekeeping. The claim of political impossibility that prevented our institutions to adapt to the different realities of economic interdependence and technological change, and that is still ingrained in the UN Common Agenda and the social developmental goals, has only recently started to erode. It may indicate that an incipient change in epistemology and a potential paradigm shift is finally occurring, one that is necessary if we want to prevent societal collapse. I might have fallen down on my side. So we need to remember that the Common Agenda and the SDG were adopted in a pre-COVID-19, pre-war in Ukraine, pre-generative AI, and in other words, in a pre-polycrisis political environment in which the reality of interconnected cascading failures was not as acute as it is today. But today, the failure of the SDGs to deliver, which is now almost a consensus, has made clear that even at the UN level, we need new metrics. And we are starting to discuss new metrics beyond the GDP. And also, a new language has been deployed in the latest UN documents to indicate that progress and ability to cope cannot happen through self-compliance by states. So in January 2023 this year, the UN also launched a new accelerator for systemic risk assessment with the mandate to address crises that are increasingly interrelated across the ecological, socio-economical, technological, and political systems. So this marks a turn in epistemology of the role of international organization. And similar work is also being conducted by the High-Level Committee on Programs and this core group on Beyond GDP, which started valuing what counts. So on the new concept of progress beyond gross domestic product. Now, I want to address a little bit the role that censorship has played in why we are arriving at least 100 years late at the conclusion that we need different institutions and that structure shifting toward more effective and more democratic ones that can work in the public interest is occurring just at this 11th hour. So already by the mid-1930s, the fact that international organization, in order to reflect democratic ethos and values, required a systemic change beyond fragmentation was a well-established fact. It was something that at the time was not perceived as, there was a lot of consensus on this. For example, Friedrich Schumann put this clearly in 1934 when he stated that we cannot rely on good faith or public authorities supplemented by exhortation. And yet we are still relying on good faith of public authorities or factions, special interests supplemented by exhortation. Around the same time, this is the 1930s, system thinking started to emerge in addressing global economic and security crisis. And in the debate between the League of Nations and the press, this was a theme that emerged when the League asked the help of journalist organizations to prevent the spread of false news because of their impact that they could have on peace. The answer of the press was that not less information, but more information and less gatekeeping, less filtering were key to the problem of the League, the problem of peace, given the interdependence of peace, democracy, and truth. In other words, the press stressed that the importance of including the truth of the other. Among some journalists, there was this realization that international organization made of nation states was in and of itself perpetuating false news, weaponized information charged with emotions. It was an institution in which the whole can never see itself. It was an aggregate of different warped images of reality at odds with societal cohesion and the changes brought by technology and economic interdependence. it could not possibly prevent crisis. It was at that point that system thinking started to penetrate the new designs of institutions and communities, and it was reevaluated and it reevaluated the importance of Jane Madison's warnings on the problems of factions. So in this sense, it is not a coincidence that the thinking of a new institution reevaluated what, in the words of Madison, who defined factions as a number of citizens, whether amounting to a minority or a majority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. So, in this sense, the preeminent change before and during World War II was made explicit in Federalist designs that underlined that it was not the aggregation of the parts, but rather their organization that could create new behavior in the whole. And in this thinking was developed this, as a prototype that remains important today because it addressed the fact that some systems adapt to change in a stable way, but only to such changes as they were actually designed to accept. The changes were that in these designs that were proposed, that were popular, and that were competing with the design that eventually the UN adopted. These designs, the changes, they were specifically in regard to how to reconcile societal cohesion with individual liberty, equality, and agency. In other words, they were conceived as an adaptive system of institutions in which democracy was held responsible to include the minority of one. In the post-war, with the advance of cybernetics, the importance of adaptive systems and a unified perception of the whole was stressed in the analysis emerging from cybernetics. And another political thinker, Daniel Al-Azhar, associated this with the functioning of federalist designs of institutions. It is my hope that in thinking about how we can create an inclusive public sphere, we address the importance of removing factions and censorship and their role in our democratic institutions, both internally and externally. This requires critical thinking and awareness of how we may partake in supporting designs of community and institutions that are ultimately exclusive, despite their claim to be the opposite. So in this sense, thinking about the role of civil society organizations, I think that they have an important role to play, one in which they themselves cannot become satisfied with current forms of exclusions, including the dynamics that are now described under the word of stakeholderism. Instead, the key to generate positive tipping points is by removing the claim of political impossibility and challenging the agenda-setting powers that, as Madison said, do not have at heart the interests of the community. Today, this community has to be understood also in its planetary dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love this idea of challenging the agenda-setting powers. As we PhD. I am happy now to give the floor to Marion Troini. She's a political analyst, a blogger, and an advisor, and she's also, may I say it, the global wing of G100 for networking. G100 is a network of empowered women empowering other women, and she was so nice to involve me in these beautiful networks. So I thank you also for that, not only for being here. So now you have the floor, and I think you have. You need to share the screen. You have the presentation already on the screen. Okay, so It is on screen. Let's see. Buongiorno a tutti. Prima di cominciare, poche parole agli italiani. Mi sento veramente onorata. Siamo noi onorata di avere a Susanna Caffaro come CEA dell'Italia. E mi sento onorata l'opportunità di essere una blogger e anche di CSN, e Susanna ha permesso che siamo qui. Mi ringrazio enormemente e anche una riconoscenza alla città di Brindisi per mettere tutta la sua istituzione e il suo cuore, la sua anima, per permettere questo che per me è prima di tutto, e comincio all'inglese, multi-stakeholders approach, all actors on stage. That is the only way that we will start talking about a supranational democracy. How do we legitimate the globalization system? It exists. We have a global system. Well, we start like this. This is one of the tools that we can move forward by intellectual production. Not the intellectual production coming only from academic, but the intellectual production as an outcome from the combination of all multi-stakeholders. But what do we have so far? And allow me to have this beautiful sculpture. It's an old version. We are going to start with the old version, and I will end my presentation with the last version of this Mother Nature from artist Lorenzo Quinn. This is for me the citizen, the current citizen, a citizen that is blind, without a vision, pretending to handle global crisis, but in the end is in a sea of uncertainty, without vision. Please keep this image, and we will see how we will evolve on this vision of what have to be a citizen for me. Let's ask questions. Don't trust only on what media is saying. Do you feel a global citizen? That's very important. It's a matter of feeling, of belonging. You belong to a global community? How much attachment do you have in relation to a global system? Again, allow me to this emotional aspect of if we belong or not. Technology. Technology makes you more global. Well, we would say that, or maybe just international, and you keep your empowerment at local level. Media news, this is key. Media news is the one who are telling us that this is about globalization system. But how much do you trust? It's reliable. This fake news on the last years of the fake news, the manipulation, ideological perspectives. Do you agree with this? And then political leaders. This is also key to talk about supranational democracy, and I would say to start talking about supranational. Do we give our political leaders representation for a supranational democracy? Because that means that we could have a global system legal or not. So in the end, what we have to go is through a critical thinking process. And you would say, but this is obvious. We always do that. We always do that in an academic perspective, or an analyst perspective. In real terms of what we do in political arena, we see that it's not. In the media or social media, there is a process of critical thinking. No, we have thinkers that criticize. And there's a missing link, because there's nothing new came from that. And that's why I like to see the social media and the media in general as a dangerous octopus. And why I choose this animal? Because an octopus, first of all, when they're sleeping, they change their colors. So what is the true colors of the social media? And also the tentacles, they embrace us, and they let us think that we are in a global system. We are global. If we're in a social media that gather people from around the world, we are global. And we end for that without realizing, again, what I was saying before. What is a critical thinking process? When there is zero intellectual production means that we do not go through that process. A critical thinking process means new ideas, a new outcome. When we gather today, tomorrow, we will be creative. We will learn from here, for all of these speakers, or for all of you who have done during the day, what you have the ideas that inspire you. So it's an outcome that is new and not the same. So what we achieve right now, a global system that is like a panopticon. You remember a panopticon that Bentham and taken by Foucault, the surveillance in the jails. And I thought it was a great example to see how we move in this moment when we talk about a global system. That is, Facebook is the one who controls us. In fact, it became an ad hoc tribunal because they decide what is ethical and what is not. It's a real justice system. And if you don't want it, you have to withdraw from that system and you don't have any option. So who controls transparency and accountability? And let me give you an example that I think is quite a striking case. The European Union, some years ago, investigated a case for 2 billion users, the collection of data from advertisers for 2 billion users to gain advantage, unfair advantage against European Union rules for the marketplace, just to sell, only for commercial purposes. Wrong concept. I think everything came because we talk about concept without analyzing. And I know that maybe this could be controversial, but if you allow me to give my opinion, please. Global financial crisis. Do we really have a global financial crisis? Do you think that in 2008 with Lehman Brothers, we have a structural financial problems in all the planet equally? Because that's what means global. When you start breaking the structures in different parts of the world. The financial crisis was in a very specific place, and then because of a ripple effect, we have it all around the world. Global pandemics, they started in a very specific place that we don't even, paradoxically, we don't even know if that is the origin. They have said that they have been created in a laboratory. It could be in China or it could be in another country and take it to that specific town. But again, the same, the ripple effect that impact the rest. Global political leadership, we talk about Joe Biden, Vladimir Putin. You consider there are global political leaders? We say yes, there are global leaders. They have an impact globally in all the world. And we continue exploring that and realize that with this a global leader, it's about conciliation, not about defending one position. Global military action. We have a global military action against Russia. We say that, yes, we heard that. Is that true? NATO is a military alliance that now joined with the European Union, but more than 70% of NATO is founded by the US. That's global. Well, maybe yes, but it's not democratic. So why? I think all these concepts are wrong, because we do not have a global good governance. And if we have it, how do we measure? So I took legal, legitimate, and multilateral, three aspects of the same. And I took this sculpture from Richard Serra. The name is A Matter of Time. It's a maze made in steel, and I think that is what we have. A maze, what is legality, what is legitimated, what is global or multilateral. So let's start by the last part. We are in a current system that is global or is multilateral. Well, I have no doubts that it's multilateral, because it's not a consolidated global system. Maybe it's in progress, but we still work over multi-stakeholder agreements. No, we build through multilateral agreements that is different from a system. Are we legitimated to demand a global system? Well, I really believe it. We need humanitarian action coordinated. We need knowledge exchange. We need information. We need technology. And for that, we need a systemic global world that allow us to get the benefits of all these aspects. Now, in legal terms, is legal? Let me explore the Article 9 from the Spanish Constitution, but in most of the Constitution you will have these principles. Citizens and public power are subject to their constitutions and the rest of the legal system. What that means that we don't have nothing above. So diplomacy, negotiation, is supposed just to be ratified then by the national system. So that's not a global system. We don't delegate for a supranational democracy. We only delegate in terms of diplomacy, and then we ratify nationally. And this is one of the big mistakes that I think that we commit with Ukraine and Russia war. I choose this sculpture from Lorenzo Quinn that is a slingshot, because we shoot to win. Delivering military action more than 1 year in a steady basis. The only thing that we are, and that's the outcome, is that we are escalating the aggression. Ukrainian is defending themselves, yes, but they defend themselves in a global perspective, in a global conflict, means that we deliver military, and that is really legal. We deliver for a short period of time. And then we have to make others regionally resolve their own conflict. That is historically, that is regional, and they haven't started 1 year ago. Now with this escalation, and Ukraine is gaining the war, of course it is. What we are doing now, we are creating more confrontation. There's no diplomacy, there's no negotiation. It's absolutely cancelled. What happened in 2014, The Guardian, I think it's a reliable source. And in 2014, the far right, Ukraine became a far right group. Azov, one of the regimes, is part of the National Guard. So there were real problems to explore, to investigate. But instead of doing that, we are continuing with the war, and any anti-war position, pro-peace, means that you are not popular. Why? Because the media is the one who is empowered to decide which position we need to have. I really disagree with this, and I'm convinced that my intention is to be a peace builder. And if war is not fair, negotiation is always fair. It's a problem of leadership, because we do have a global political leadership. Because when you have a global leadership, you negotiate, you try to keep the balance. The geopolitical conflicts are the one who demand not the media power, but a real political leadership. Instead, citizens are just observers. We are not actors. We repeat what the media say. There's nothing new. It's the power from only one position. And that's why that I would like to invite you to revisit, because I'm sure here they're all from the university, so they will go through what is the Edmund Burke model of what we want for a political system, a trustee or a delegation. What we want for that, where we delegate on our political leaders to take their own decision, and after 5 years we bring them to accountability. Or we are in a steady accountability and a steady rapport. That is key to know if the global system is legal or not, how much power we will give to the political system. And I choose this sculpture that is in Madrid, in the city center. And because here there are political leaders, but there's no the citizens. The citizens, if they are over there, lost. And I'm so glad, like 3 days ago, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said, we are not in war against Russia. And that's a claim for peace. That's a claim to get into what is a globalization meaning. And for me, this is the meaning of globalization. When you have block of nations, this is the only way that I found in my research
that you find that they keep a balance, a geopolitical balance, to have only one power, to impose only one standard, when you are multicultural but under only one perspective, it only creates more confrontation. BRICS, for example, have worked, so means that if we do this effort to have diplomacy and negotiation, we could keep a balance. And we have partners for peace, the PEACE agreement, established in 1991, that is established between the countries of NATO and other countries where Russia is one of them. So why going to boost this agreement more? Because it exists, it's there. So, and it's there for that, to keep a global, that was really an effort to keep a global world. Standardization of products is part of a commercial business aspect. Sustainable development goals is a goal, is an aspiration, is an expectation. But if we impose Western or a centralized power, it will be very difficult that we get into global. And I would like to give this example and focus on what is Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. Do you know that there are many differences? Niqab, hijab, burqa. Which is the one we need to ban? There are like 9, I think. It's a long list. And there is quite controversial. And when we speak about gender equality, that I always say, it's gender equality not because we are equal to men, it's because we need to be equal in opportunities, and it's different. But we try to get into Muslim countries, banning these kind of traditions, not being aware that that countries will feel rejection, and that leads into aggression, and aggression leads into war. So peace is the first sustainable development goal. We cannot move to sustainability if we do not hold a sustainable political system. And for that, it's a matter of reflection. We are legitimated to ban this kind of traditions or not. Maybe if there are residents in Europe, yes, because it's a local community, hold the right to decide their own rules. But when we are expecting to have a supranational sovereignty centralized in just one power, we need to be careful. Because if we want to do that, we need to be as tolerant as possible, as flexible as possible. In the end, and you remember the first version that I showed you, this is for me the really citizen, empowered citizen, a transparent planet, succeeding in what is transparency and accountability mechanism, and a citizen that is naked, yes, but is naked in transparency, inserted in a society, in the edge, yes, is in the edge, but in uncertainty, but holding the power, and with their skin, that they change their skin, learning new skills, exchanging with others with different backgrounds, and getting adapted to what we are, a chameleon time, because it's not a matter of a supranational power, but supranational democracy. Thank you so very much.
It was controversial, yes. It was provoking. It was interesting, yes, as well. And I think we could discuss for hours and hours about the challenges you answered to all of us. And now I invite here Jan Bienenhoff, who is a journalist and also a European projects activist, and talking about the regions of Europe and the role of regions. Presentation.
Thank you so much, Susanna. In my presentation, I invite you to join me in a smart switch from the global to the local, which should also be possible in the framework of debating democracy. And I'll be talking with you briefly through a project I, together with a couple of other colleagues in a variety of universities, are in the process of setting up to investigate a possible new role for the regions of Europe. So bear with me. What you see here is the map of Europe in bird view. And I invite you to join me to go a little bit higher and higher and higher. And when you look from that angle, you will see that Europe is not in such a good shape. There are clearly problems, and to a certain extent, I think there's also, there's more a conclusion from earlier panelists already. We are at the end of the line. European unification is certainly at this point in time at a crossroads. And it will be, I'll be referring to a combination of external pressures and internal pressures which cause this situation. It has been already mentioned by other panelists. We have a series of geopolitical threats which are now Europe is confronted with. We have, you could really say, a derailing migration policy which is in the process to be controlled, but hardly is so far. We have an ever deepening climate crisis to deal with. So there are a range of external pressures that also the Union finds increasingly difficult to deal with. And there are, on the other hand, also certain internal pressures. The one I would like to refer to here is the accelerating enlargement process. We are about to continue the talks with a range of Balkan countries. Ukraine already has become a de facto member of the Union, although formally that's totally not the case. In practice, it is. And when you look at that picture, which is in this slide, it looks like a picture stemming from the French Revolution, but in fact it's not. It was taken 2 weeks ago in Tbilisi in Georgia, where also in that former Soviet state there is a growing amount of people who really are in support of joining the European Union. So you see that the enlargement process is rolling, and to a large extent tends also to become out of control. And there is also a problem, a growing problem around the position of the citizens, as virtually all panelists already mentioned. They tend to be further alienated from the Union as it has been growing and is functioning at this point in time. It has always been recognized. We've always been talking about what we call the democratic deficit. And that's a nice phrase to express that there is a problem, but at the same time, people who are using the phrase mentioned, but we will not address it for the time being, too complicated. And that is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore that problem. The pressure is growing also from the citizen side, and it is one thing I think we have to take into account. Certainly I, in my presentation, will do so. So, the conclusion can be the ever wider and closer union, which of more or less the slogan which has been used in the past decades, in fact was an ideology. It never actually came true. We have been widening, but the combination with an ever closer, ever deeper union never came through. On the contrary. And what you notice now is widespread skepticism. And I depicted here with a picture which is taken from one of the representatives who attended the past conference on the future of Europe, and the Citizens Take Over NGO, and they claim together, in fact, with representatives from the European Parliament, the Council should pay more attention to the situation and should take concerted action in this respect. And that's basically because the situation, as I mentioned, is slowly getting out of hand. And we're reaching a state within the Union of complexity that's becoming seriously problematic. And I underlined this with a quote from an historian, Peter Frankelfan, who's lecturing in Oxford University. And he concluded in a recent book on the fate of empires that whenever complexity and size are, under given circumstances, are out of hand, they become weaknesses for the system. And they create a situation of unbalance that potentially can be very dangerous. And I tend to agree with his conclusion. So, what we have to conclude then is that we come more or less to the end of what I call patchwork policies. The whole notion that whenever something has to be agreed upon, it's always late, it's always last minute, it always comprises a series of incomprehensible compromises, and in fact, to a large extent, risks to be inefficient. That's what we've been doing, because there is a sort of an integral level of not agreeing on what we actually should be doing together, how we should take concerted action. And I must admit, the Union has got a message. When you see what has happened in the last 1 or 2 years, there has been a series of hardening actions. You have seen the concerted actions in the field of the joint ammunition purchase, which is now being dealt with in relation to the Ukraine war. You've seen also the conclusions which were taken from the pandemic, the recent pandemic, and that also in terms of joint purchase of vaccines, I think we should try to move, and we will be moving in case there will be a new pandemic. There is a Green Deal, to a large extent also due to concerted action on the part of the European Union. So on the one hand, it works. It has not been understood, at least the way I perceive it, and we perceive it, is that this whole process of strengthening vertical integration, which is taking place, it will be balanced by a form of horizontal integration. That is not taking place. So in the end, you could say there is no trade-off between the give and take of control. And that again creates that level of instability that potentially is rather dangerous. Can I ask my wife? I would like to take a seat. Thank you very much. And I would like to illustrate this with some of the results of a recent poll, which was set up by a scholar in, I think, the University in Milano, together with the Bertelsmann Foundation, a German foundation, on attitudes of European citizens. And I especially draw your attention to the right-hand side part of that table, because there you notice that although people, by and large, citizens, support the whole idea of a stronger vertical integration, the fact that we are taking stronger action on a number of policy issues, that it should not mean a form of transfer of sovereignty to the Union, so to the central organizations. So at some point, citizens are not, not totally right. They see something is happening, and to some extent they will agree. To some extent, they also say already right now, let's hold here. It's far enough. We have to find a different solution in which we also can be in control of our own affairs and not hand over sovereignty to a large extent to supranational organizations, and especially in key countries like France, like Germany, like Italy. The support for the handover of sovereignty is waning. Yeah? It is decreasing. And that's an important system. It of course was completely different in a country, in a member state like Poland. But that just happened after the start of the Ukraine war. For all of a sudden, the Poles want to be in, you know, they want to run together to Brussels if need be. So it's also, there's an element of reaction to the present state of play, but still I think it's a warning system, that you cannot do everything, you cannot centralize to your own volition. Now, in essence, so we are confronted with the question about what exactly will be the relationship between the base and the center of our union. And in our view, it's about time to start with a fundamental rethink of the institutional architecture. So not only have the Green Deals, which are functioning to some extent, not only set up energy deals, which we did last year, but in addition, I think that would be a proposal on our part, we also need a democratic deal. And in our scenario, that would mean to further the citizen-driven horizontal integration process, one way or the other. We've had suggestions already from earlier panelists how that actually should be done. And also here I will elaborate one example of the research group I am involved in. And we would say at the heart of such a fundamental rethink, there will be European citizenship. That is very fundamental, of course. That's probably arranged, you know, also in legal terms. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that will be a difficult thing, because it's still, you know, when you look at European law, it's a non-category, you know, it's simply not there. It's been described as a territorial entity which is there and we simply will not deal with, you know, in terms of regulation. There's also still not a serious European public sphere, which in fact is one of the foundations of a form of active European citizenship. It has not been taking place. The media roles we have been referring to earlier in this session basically are still national and hardly European or pan-European. That is a problem. And it also needs to be addressed. And then also, you know, if you have European citizenship, you also need parties that express that view. And there are no pan-European parties, except for one, a small one, called Volt, which recently came into existence. Is holding its position. You know, it will be interesting to see what happens with the next European elections. In our country, in national elections, they are in the process of steady growth. They are in the process of developing their views on and on. So there's one. But in the end, you know, we need a series of European parties that also reflect the variety of European views. That will be one of the expressions of European citizenship. But for the moment, it's not there. And for that reason, I think, you have to look into the possibilities of another form of intermediary body. And there we put our attention at the regions of Europe. And why the regions? Because the regions have what European citizens do not have. They are the carriers of our identity. Within your region, there's an element of trust. There's a sense of connectedness, belonging, which is not present in Europe as of yet. Regions are concrete. They, to a large extent, are personal. You can see faces, you know, connected to your region. And that's a huge advantage, you know, to be able to come to terms, to come to grasp with what a person actually advocates. And of course, regions are the connectors between the past and the future. And that is important in times which are as hectic as our times are at this point in time. So you need a point where you say, okay, I can rely on how we've been doing things, how we used to perceive particular developments, and where we should go. And that's also a role, sort of a natural role regions can take, and in our view, should take. Now, if you try to put that into a model, then you have to look which regions become active players here. And it's quite clear that the present administrative entities, the regions as they are, and has been self-proclaimed as a sovereign entity, are far too many, far too diverse to be able to play an important role in this model. Then we have, of course, already for a number of years, we have the new regions, which are clusters of regions, often cross-border, in almost all cases cross-border, and they are functioning, but only up till a certain level, because invariably they have been created by their administrations. They never came from the citizens, they never came from bottom-up. It was always an initiative of governors in those collaborating interregions. They're fully project-driven. They're fully funding dependent, and basically they are run on the Interact funds. As a consequence, what they do and how they operate is fairly ad hoc. So it will be very difficult to give them a structural place. And we've been thinking about another type of interregion that could be set up, that should be developed, which more or less compensates for the elements that I just mentioned that are not there in the existing new regions. And in those interregions, we think, first and foremost, they should have the ambition to become a structural building block of the EU institutional framework. Not just a project-driven entity. No, they should aspire for serious power that they actually also can exert. Now also, civil society should be in the lead of these interregions. They should take the initiative. People should have definitely the will, the power, and also the initiative to bring those regions together in larger entities. And at some point, it can be done in co-creation with the local governments, of the regional governments at some point. But certainly, civil society should have a far more active role than until now has been the case. And then, in terms of definition of their geographical size and form, they should be created on the basis of common experiences, of commonality. It can be historic, can be cultural, can also be more recently economic entities that have a good reason for work together. So it should be driven by a common cause. And when you have those elements, then I think that could lead to the existence of another type of interregion, which is far more useful, far more democratic, and also in position to enter the institutional framework that, as I said, should be changed. Now we had to think, in our project team about a proper term for those interregions, because else we keep on confusing them with existing entities. And we came up, when you look at the size of those interregions, they crisscross through Europe. They have a very irregular size, and we decided to use a more festive term for it, to give it all, to add an element of pleasure to it. So we invented the term serpentines. They go as a serpentine through particular parts of Europe, and in the end they come together, and finally we have a party together. That's the big idea. That's the big idea. So, but certainly, at a more serious note, they will be cross-border, those serpentines. They will go beyond the present regional administrative structures. These are there, but we can leave behind. To a certain extent, there will be an overlap, but not necessarily. They can go across the borders of nation states. They can even include accession countries, as I will show in a minute. And they even, in one of the examples we are studying, we went to the UK, and we just said, well, very nice that you had this exit policies. We think differently, and we just take action also in part of your empire. That will all happen, you know, project-wise, I must say, for the time being. But I think in this process, when you're redesigning, when you want to have a new model, you have to be provocative to a certain extent. You have to be initiative, and that's what we're trying to do here. No. I'm not going back. Yes. One back. Now, here we are. We have a map of Europe, and here you see the 4 serpentines we have under investigation. First of all, we're here. You know, you see a nice collection in the red circle at the bottom of the picture of this region, together with the accession countries of Albania and Montenegro. There's a sea intertwined, but the Adriatic has often been described as a bridge rather than a gap, and also so in terms of cultures, in terms of history, that often has made sense. So this is one serpentine we have under investigation with already very promising results, I can mention. Now the second one we are looking at is more at the heartland of Europe. That's an interregion which is a combination of Polish and Ukrainian territory. That region formerly, historically, was known as Galicia. We have a Galicia, of course, in Spain, but there's also a Galicia, has always been historically in the heart of Europe. And that, to a large extent, despite of all sorts of wars and divisions and new borderlines, is still in existence in the mind and the minds of the people. And they are now talking to one another, especially in the field of humanitarian aid, logically, at this point in time. But it's nice then that you can revise such an old structure into a novel model. So that would be a second one. The third one, we moved then to the North Sea. That's my region. I live in the south of the Netherlands, where there's also a combination, actually now, of 3 Dutch and 3 Belgian, Flemish provinces, all speaking the same language, Dutch, and are in the process of creating a corridor between the North Sea and the German heartland. And in that respect, always have had that function, but completely fragmented, and are putting those efforts together into a new type of interregion, a new serpentine. And then last, we have only limited resources, so we have to stick to 4. That we've called the Celtic serpentine, and that comprises the member state Ireland and the non-member state Northern Ireland and the region of Scotland, where also there are permanent historic connections in spite of all political upheaval and developments. They are still working together and even have extremely strong economic impetus right now to find a solution beyond the European compromises. And they're working at that already. And for us, it's also a very interesting test area to go there and to see how they actually perceive. But what you see here in motion are those serpentines are interregion of a new type of collaboration. They cross all sorts of borders. They also challenge all sorts of existing borders, difficulties, but nevertheless, they're gaining traction in spite of developments. Now you would say, come on, Jan, what have you been drinking last night? Are you dreaming aloud? Well, this is extremely difficult to realize. But my answer would be yes and no. It is difficult, because as I mentioned already, there's no legal basis for whatever region in the European institutional framework. They simply do not exist. And there's also strong opposition from the state level and even on the part of the European Council against all forms of collaboration that goes cross-border in the way I just described. Because in a way, quietly and very politely, but we are attacking the powers that be. And when you go against vested interests, of course, you can expect opposition. And I think to a certain extent, That's what we're witnessing right now. But the good and the heartening thing is European citizens are not aware of that and are not taking care of it. And they take initiatives that fully support this kind of development I've just been describing. And yes, I must say, on the one hand, there are difficulties, but also we now witness the winds of change. I mentioned already all those processes of stronger vertical integration, all those initiatives in which countries all of a sudden managed to work together collectively. So you can also say, yes, we can. And also we have to find out if there are new ways of innovating our institutional framework. So we should try to go ahead with it. And then there are, and that's the concluding part of my presentation, there are two things to be taken care of. So on the one hand, what will be the destination? And on the other hand, what's the road to that particular destination? Now, first of all, what will be the destination? We think, first and foremost, we have to focus our attention on the position and the actions and the stance of the European Parliament. Why the European Parliament and not the Commission, let alone the Council? Because the Parliament is the only European body, which is elected by the citizenry. And that means that there is a process of election, there is a connection with European citizenship already, room for improvement, mind you, but nevertheless, it is there. Secondly, European Parliament supports all types of deliberative democracy, which is very important because that is European citizenship in motion already. It's happening grassroots and in all parts of Europe, sometimes local, sometimes regional, sometimes supported by national governments or even implemented by national governments. Think of France, think of Ireland. So the European Parliament has always been supportive of those movements from the very beginning. So I think that is a place to start. Also because it's the institution which is relatively open for reform. You can actually talk with representatives and they agree on the necessity. Not everybody sees precisely which way and how exactly, and there can be a variety of scenarios, but nevertheless, they are open for reform. So I think that is a good point to start. Now, what will you do in terms of reform? What actually can be done practically? Then I think what we should try to strive for is a form of dual representation to the European Parliament. A combination of representation via pan-European parties and another part in which these European circuit lines or interregion play an important part. Also because they are two sides of the same coin. Via pan-European parties, what you can express as a citizen is your beliefs, your views, your ambitions, your ideals. Then parties are the right vehicle for that. On the other hand, European citizens also have interests, concrete interests, and they have priorities, and they are much more local and connected to regions, and not so much to ideologies. So I would say a combination of those two, a sort of a dual voice, would be an ideal representation in which European citizens can take a much more active and full stance. So the destination, in short, would be a much more mature, a more democratic, a more future-proof European voice. And that can be organized, we think, via a form of dual representation to the European Parliament. Now, we are the first one to think about this. And I'll show you 3 maps now, which are interesting. The one on the most left side, it comes from a single European citizen. It's a founder of the Heineken Brewery Company. And Freddy Heineken, already in the midst of the past century, was strongly in favor of another division of Europe into smaller entities. and you put a range of scientists to work, and then they came up with this map, which is in fact divides Europe in, I think, 62 new regions, but obviously in the middle of the last century, nobody paid attention. It was a nice idea, it was an ideal, but nevertheless the thinking already started as early as that. The map in the middle is more recent. It's stemming from European Democracy Lab. Where also thinking about regionalization has taken form as an element of the way they think Europe should go ahead. But again, it's also to a large extent arbitrary, in which you as a citizen end up, these lines, there's hardly justification for many of them. And the right-hand side map, which is in fact a detail of a map, which is depicting the regions we are in now. You haven't seen, but you'll only be seeing in a few months from now, because it's a proposal of the Pan-European Party I mentioned earlier, FOLT, who is also will be starting the run-up to the next European elections with a form of regionalization, which they call districts. But again, also, it's more logical the way they have been thinking about it, also because there was citizen involvement in the drafting of this map. But still, a bit shaky in my mind. You look at, for instance, what you see here. Albania has taken over Montenegro, and became a joint district, in their view. Now, that's not really realistic, I would say. That's something has to happen before that would come in motion. So all those three maps, they have the disadvantage of stemming from the drawing board. The people sitting together, making up their mind, and we think in our team that you cannot design Europe from a drawing board. You have to let them grow organically. They have to come from the people, they should be set up from the people. So we hope that in the future you take a longer period of time to do that, and you accept what has been mentioned, in fact, by one of the first speakers this morning, accept the fact that this is a process and cannot be taken as a decision. You cannot redesign by conclusion or by declaration. It has to grow slowly, and we, with our team, would like to make a small contribution to that process. Now, what needs to be done, in terms of change agenda, to end on a practical note? Certainly, you have to sharpen and more in detail over this idea of the serpentine interregion. We've come up with the idea, and I mentioned it to you very briefly. You will hear more about it tomorrow in the presentation of my colleague Arjan van Waal, who will also be presenting the serpentines and the ideas behind it, and how it could come into motion more briefly. Also, we have to draw attention to implementation strategies. For this, what I've been presenting by and large is the what, but the how to get there, strategies. Those also have to be designed, and that's also a matter of serious research that should be taken up by the knowledge sector European-wide. Then on the second thing is that in our view, we also are in bad need of a small circle of what we call significant outsiders. People who are not a part of the institutional framework, who do not have a position inside the institutions, but nevertheless have been thinking about it very clearly as part of their professional career. Could be scholars, could also be people who in the business community are confronted with the realities of a unified Europe. Could be former politicians, for instance, who surprisingly take a much more relaxed stance, on the whole issue, once you start talking with them and they're not in motion. Yes. So there are the obvious candidates, that's quite clear, and that would be, in my view, a good element to bring this whole idea a bit further. And then certainly, that's my last slide, challenging the significant insight. So also the institutions should not be left alone. They also have to take part in this whole change process. And the European Parliament has been mentioned already. We talk with the fractions, we talk with people who are spokespersons for these integration processes. Within the Commission, of course, there is already a lot of attention, also we mentioned this morning, for deliberative democracy. Those actions can be focused, can be strengthened, should be continued for a longer period of time. In my view, that can also be a serious lobby. And there's, of course, the Committee of the Regions. When we're talking about regions, also the committee should have a say. And although they, in the past, I found it personally very difficult to see where they stand in this debate. In the recent conference on the future of Europe, there has been quite a more outspoken view on the part of the representatives of the Committee of the Regions. In fact, 3/4 of them are in support of this idea that you not only voice your opinion, but also your opinion can last politically. And so there can be a move, and also there we hope that things will continue to move. This is my story. Thank you for it, and I hope to hear.
Thank you, Ian. And that's very interesting, this move from the global to the local and seeing this as a building the texture for the public sphere. And now we have Federico Panomi, who's standing here. You have a presentation, Federico. So Federico, as well as Lazar, will have a bit shorter presentation because we need to have some time for the debate. But thank you for being here, Federico. And he was here in the first edition as a student. Now he's here as a PhD student, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you. And the topic of Federico is fiscal rules. Actually, fiscal rules as a tool for integration. So, fiscal regulation and fiscal capacity in Europe after the COVID, as an Estonian man. Yes, let me help you. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Susanna, for hosting me and organizing all this very beautiful conference. In my presentation, I will talk about what is happening in European fiscal and economic governance after the pandemic using the lenses of federalism, which is one of the main theories that we think not only as looking at how Europe should evolve, but also why it is evolving. So I will take the lenses of two aspects of the fiscal governance, which is both fiscal regulation and fiscal capacity, which are concepts which were developed by federalist scholars, most recently by Tomasz Wozniakowski, a colleague of mine at Lewis. And I will take two case studies, the two case studies in Europe, which are the Next Generation EU and specifically the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and then the reform of the European fiscal rules. Starting with the Recovery and Resilience Facility, well, the novelty of this instrument is, of course, that the financing of these funds come from the European Union directly, which goes to the market to borrow the money. But how this complex system works is peculiar, because then the money is lent or given to member states who has to comply to a certain conditionality and criteria from the European Union, which come basically from two points. The first one is the annual sustainable growth strategy of the European Union, and then the country-specific recommendation, which were pre-existing of the Next Generation EU as part of the annual cycle of member states. Then the system of choice of the plans, of course, the plan is negotiated between the member state and the European Commission. And then we will look at the Italian case study, and the Council decides on the plan on the basis of a Commission recommendation. The plan can be subject to renegotiations. In Italy, we are experiencing an attempt to renegotiate the PNRR at the moment. And another, I think, very interesting characteristic of this negotiation of the Next Generation EU is that the negotiation to obtain it in the July of 2020 was a very fierce negotiation. It was possible to reach a deal with mainly two aspects which were demanded by some member states, especially Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Austria. One is the sunset clause, which means that after the 2026, the Next Generation EU will not be renovated, and the rebates. So basically, those member states had a discount on the annual contribution to the multi-annual financial framework. So this actually gives the idea of the imperfection of the Next Generation EU as a tool toward leading the EU on a federal model. Also, the governance at the member state level is really peculiar. I have no time to explain all of this. It is divided between different levels at the national level, and of course it was subject to variation itself, from the Draghi government to the Meloni government. In the Draghi government, the Ministry of Economy and Finance had a bigger role because it was the single point of contact with the European Commission and had a structure which was aimed at monitoring all the investments, while under the Meloni government, most of the competencies of the Ministry of Economy and Finance were translated into the Presidency of the Council, which is now the single point of contact with the European Commission. Of course, then you have the role of national audit institutions like the Ragioneria Generale, not only, but also the La Corte dei Conti. And then you have also the aspects of the involvement of civil society with public communication and portals like Italia Domani. This again gives the idea of the complexity of the Next Generation EU. And also, if we look at the timeline of negotiations, we see that these new instruments proved a bit problematic because no one in the Italian political system was expecting something similar. If we look at the political situation and how institutions were involved, then we see some pitfalls. For example, we had two governments and a crisis in the process of negotiating the Italian NRRP. Of course, we had the Conte II cabinet, and then a crisis of our government, which was probably caused by the Conte II NRRP itself. And then we had the government of Draghi. In the meantime, we had, of course, a first step, which was the guidelines of the NRRP, in which the Italian government set an idea on how to shape projects and how to put them into the plan. And it is peculiar to note that most of the projects were known to the public opinion, also to politicians, thanks to a leak of the Corriere della Sera, which showed to the public opinion the amount of projects which were presented to the plan. Then the parliament, after this leak, had the possibility to analyze the guidelines, and then after the analysis of the guidelines, you had some drafts which were given to the parliamentary groups of the majority in the parliament. And then after the first proposal of the Conte II, you had the parliament analyzing the drafts, and then came Draghi government, which made new drafts, and then it led to the definitive version. So it was something very unusual that made the parliament to invent something new to try and influence this decision-making process. Which also gives the idea of the imperfection of these instruments as something that could become permanent in the future. So if we look at this with the lenses of federalism, we see, of course, that the Next Generation EU was a major step forward because it created the principle that we can finance European projects with European money, but still there are a lot of complications in reality. And we also see it now when it comes to the attempts to renegotiate the plan, and also when we see the difficulties in realizing some of the investments, Asili Nido, for example, or university housing. There are many projects which are at risk of not being realized. So this is on the side of the fiscal capacity. Then, to the side of fiscal regulation, the EU fiscal rules. As you probably know from the press, there is now the proposal to reform the Stability and Growth Pact, and the European Commission very recently proposed some legal documents which are now in the ether of approval, which will see the European Parliament and the Council confronting to and with the idea of approving them and make them enter into force before 2024. So the steps were that before the pandemic, there was a public consultation to reform the fiscal rules. Of course, the pandemic itself changed the agenda, and especially in the field of the fiscal rules, there was the activation of the General Escape Clause, which suspended some of the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact. This allowed Europe to reopen the public consultation, which led to a communication of the European Commission on the orientation of the reform, which is of November 2022. This consultation, of course, also in this case had some criticalities, because it was mostly participated by Italian actors, and some of the countries that could represent the other side of the debate weren't really engaged in the discussion, because probably they were more fit to the status quo and didn't really have an interest in discussing ambitious proposals. Then in March 2023, we had the Council orientation, so also the Council approved the document with its orientations on the reform proposal, and then finally in April we had the actual legal documents, which of course need to be approved. What will change in the European fiscal governance basically is, well, there are many principles that will change. One is the annuality and the time horizon of the rules. With the current framework, objectives had to be respected annually by member states. Now there is the idea of member states presenting multi-annual plans, fiscal structural plans, which would have the goal to make fiscal policy more medium-term rather than short-term. There is also the idea that one size doesn't really fit all member states, so the European Commission will have more flexibility to apply the rules according to the economic situation of a single member state. There is an effort to simplify the rules. Now with the current framework, we have several operational indicators. Now with the proposal, we will have a single operational indicator. Then from the Next Generation EU, the new framework will borrow the concept of reforms and investments as a way to correct imbalances, and not only structural reforms. So there will be the idea also of having a European funding to solve some problems which are object of the European fiscal framework. Then there is of course, in the original orientations on the Commission, but it's not really into the new texts, a greater role for independent fiscal institutions at the national level. In Italy, there is the Ufficio Parlamentare di Bilancio. I don't think how it will really be affected by the new governance, but we will see, of course, the final texts. Then there is a reduction of sanctions, moving towards more reputational sanctions, because it's logical that if a country is in economic troubles, then having very heavy financial sanction doesn't really help a member state to solve the problem. And finally, the idea of a fiscal capacity. So many actors in the discussions, and also the European Commission in its communication on orientations, exposed that in order to make the European Economic and Monetary Union complete, we need to build a permanent fiscal capacity at the European level. Of course, we don't see this in the new document, so it's a big problem. It is debatable whether the Commission had the force to put this into the proposal, but still what I fear is that in the current discussion, member states like Italy or France are not really pushing to create a permanent fiscal capacity. And finally, the overall objectives of the framework is not only stability and sustainability of public finances, but also resilience. So there is also a new attention to climate change. So European integration theories have something to say on this. Liberal intergovernmentalists would say that all these steps forward are led by governments which pursue their own interests, which derive from national domestic arenas. A neo-functionalist would look at more a spillover mechanism at the European level. Federalism would look, on the contrary, at comparatively which is the most effective system. So in this case, what the United States do in order to try and mutuate something from their system. Post-functionalism, on the contrary, look at the impediments, especially in the communication and public communication and politics at the national level, to stop further advancements. Failing forward is a peculiar integration theory which looks at how Europe evolves thanks to previous crises which were answered only partially, and this leads to future crises and then another incomplete solution, which leads to another crisis and another incomplete solution, and there is a loop. And this also causes Europe to evolve. And finally, historical and discursive institutionalism look at the power of critical junctures and ideas in making the institutions evolve. So from this discussion, then we can look at the limits and the advantages of these new changes from the perspective of the next generation EU. As we said, we see the importance of having European financing, but still we can't see. If we, of course, take the federalist perspective, we can't see a true move toward the federalist model. On the contrary, with the European fiscal rules, as they are shaped now, without further ambitious discussions at the level of the European Parliament and member states, we can see that they introduce well-known fixes to the current system, but still they probably are not able to work in the future world, which will be unfortunately characterized by threats, more and more threats to the European Union. So we'll see. We look at the debate and then we understand when the process is over whether those new instruments will help Europe to become more close to the federalist model. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Federico. Of course, integration through fiscal rules looks very technical, even technocratic, elitist, but nonetheless, it is the typical European evolution. And I now call here another approach which is much easier to grasp for everybody because it's easier. It's the integration through education and through a specific tool, which is a very well-known tool. And so I welcome here Lazar Ivanic to talk about education as a mechanism towards integration, the case of European Community Action Scheme for the Mobility of University Students, better known as Erasmus. Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation and for accepting me. Is it working? So today I will present education as a mechanism toward integration, the case of European Community Action Scheme for Mobility of University Students, known as Erasmus. Why Erasmus? I'm here to present students of Erasmus. I'm an Erasmus student from all my life, from how I'm studying. I'm going to the Erasmus. So it's more passionate. It's not just a topic for me. So I would start with the quotation of Jean Monnet, which he said once, which was really used during the 80s when was debate around Erasmus. If I had to start it over again, it would begin with education. Because education is what shapes us, what identity, our citizenship, and everything. We're going to see how Erasmus is shaping us. I will go just first to index legal recognition, adoption expectation, bottom-up approach, and where we are today, and some of my critiques and suggestions for Erasmus as a project. So legal basis, I chose this to start with legal because it is an interesting case that European Union Commission didn't have competencies over education in 80s, but with the case Gravier, which was a French student in Belgium, overruled the decision of Liege city in Belgium over the taxes or fees for non-Belgian students, which was based later for the Erasmus proposal from the Commission. It was taken as a non-discrimination Article 7 and 128 of Treaty of Rome, which was about vocational training. Later, with Maastricht Treaty and the Lisbon Treaty, we have Articles 9, 165, and 160, which are speaking more detail about education. First, proposal and support. The proposal for Erasmus was adopted on 25th of June 1987 as a liberal education approach. What does it mean to be a liberal education? It means that the student is prepared to wild world. It's not only the competencies in his own field where he studied, but also prepared for the life as soft skills. Why educate? And we can see that Erasmus has many layers of the liberal education. First year was 97, 98. It was really hard supported by the European Parliament. Interesting thing in European Parliament at that time that it was more supported by center-right parties than from the center-left or left parties. The CRE is its committee of the rector and university in Europe at that time, and ad hoc committee People's Europe, which was promoting European citizenship. The idea was that Erasmus is there to help students to understand other diversity of culture, economy, systems of other member states, and to build a capacity for the future of the community. Usually we could hear that it's European can become reality with Erasmus. Erasmus is there to shape future European. And why it's so successful? One say that it's one of the most successful stories of European Union. It's because it gave liberty, because Erasmus had bottom-up approach towards education and through power. It means that European Commission was there just to finance and coordinate the program. Everything else was left to the university to deal and to work how they want, to cooperate between each other, to respect more and to recognize each other. During the Erasmus first program, there was idea that was founded the European Network of University, the pilot program of SPC's European Credit System, which we know that it's later on came with Bologna system and student organization. It's developed from the ground to the top, instead of the Bologna process, which was top-down approach, which means that we imposed with Bologna system on national education system the things we need to do. Other way, bottom-up approach is also people-centered approach, where we see how people identify, how they see Erasmus. There was few research that is, like, for me, pity that in the sphere of European identity and how young people are feeling, there is not a lot of research. There is few, but we need to stay positive because a lot of young people, more than 70% after Erasmus, said that they feel more European after they have done their Erasmus. It's a we feeling. What is we feeling? It's common feeling that is shaped by individuals. It's coming from the individual to the group feeling. So where we are today, Erasmus expanded, we know all, that it's not anymore just about the mobility between higher education, it's also with vocational training, school education, adult education, sport, and youth exchange. The budget was doubled from the last circle from 2014 to 2020. It's now, we have focus on inclusion, diversity, digital Erasmus Plus, and digital Erasmus Plus. We have almost the plan is to, in 2024, reach 1 million students which are doing some kind of exchange. The problem for me, which I will speak later, is that from the student population in EU 27, only 1.5% of the students are going for the exchange, but I think the impact is much bigger. That we have till now 12.5 million students till 2021, and the people said that economical benefit of Erasmus were high. That 72% said that it's helped them to find their first job. And what is most interesting, maybe it's the Erasmus generation. There is 1 million babies expected that it was born from Erasmus couples. So we can speak, it's maybe insignificant when you see the whole population of Europe, but this is the base for the European identity. What is a critique suggestion about Erasmus? This has become elitist program, which is written that founds the scholarship for the students are becoming low because we're going on quantity, not on quality of the Erasmus. So only those who have money can go on Erasmus, actually. Then we have my suggestion, what is missing for Erasmus, if we want really to develop Erasmus European identity, is to have a course about European Union. It's not just enough to go another country to meet another people, to get in another culture, and to improve your language skills. Also, you need to know how you finish here, what brings you here, who finances you. Other thing is bigger visibility. Like you could see all over my presentation is the European flag. There is need to be much bigger view. We saw earlier how visual art and visual representation is really important nowadays. And there is proportionality of the students. We know that today, Italy and Spain are the country which have more than 50% of income students, and Italy is the first one with 30% of all ongoing students to Erasmus. So if we want to make it more equal, we need to make proportionality inside of European Union. So thank you for your attention.
In the end, it then bonds or mutual recognition of educational systems, we always come back to trust, which is an ingredient, a necessary ingredient to build a sphere. And now, and even if we are quite tight at times, I would like everybody who wants to contribute, or a comment, or a say, or add something, to raise your hand and come for a short contribution. Or if you're very tired, I will give you a break. But let me see first if there is anyone coming for a contribution. Please, Anthony.
One general comment to start with. Can you hear me?
Yes, but we should have also microphone.
One general comment to start with on all the plans for integration. Up till now, integration has worked only if there's pressure, if there's a crisis. In the examples that were given, where supposedly we get, we'll work together, vaccines and everything else, it worked because there was a crisis. That's the basic thing. So I don't think that Europe can go ahead and there Mitterrand is very much what he says. It has to be a crisis. There are so diverse interests, not only a crisis will be right. So all the rest of the plans that I see about how to do it, I must admit that personally I'm very skeptical. I'm sorry I'm being a little bit blunt, but that's the point of a discussion. Number two, I was a little bit surprised to see a discussion about fiscal space and fiscal regulation, and I must admit I would have expected to see more about the three famous numbers which guide the European Union today and which have literally come out of that. 2% inflation, 3% primary deficit, 60% debt. There is absolutely no basis anywhere in economic theory that says that this number should be so. This has been taken out of the hat by some bureaucrats, and that's it. And the third point I would like to make, and I finish, is that I was surprised to see that global financial crisis is not global, if I understood correctly. There is not a single country in this new system that is not being affected, for example, with the recent rise in interest rates. All countries, without a single exception, including Russia and China, have been affected. So as far as the financial crisis is concerned, I would say if there is one global thing to talk about, except climate, this is the global thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Matt, do you want to reply to this last session?
Thank you so much for your comment. I know that it will be controversial, but I have to leave my opinion there. When we talk about global financial crisis, for me, that's why I say concept. It's a matter of concepts, not a matter of impact. The impact is global. The concept in itself means that we have a global financial crisis when there is structurally, there is problems in all, not just their impact, not the ripple effect for one center. It's precisely because we don't have a global system that we have this kind of financial crisis. If we have a global system, the counterbalance will be so good that we do not need necessarily could have this impact. And what I'm saying is more or less the same argumentation that for Brexit, when UK wanted to leave the European Union, was precisely for that, because they don't want it to be part of that ripple effect for the countries that are weaker in the European Union. And yes, this is just an opinion, yes. And what you say, that I agree, what you say at the beginning, that we are moving through crisis. I always say we need to push to changes, not to be pushed by the changes and by the crisis. And that is a matter of empowerment for citizens within a very weak institutions that pretend to be global. Thank you for your comment.
I would add on this first point, I agree that the Europe grows through crisis, but I think that if we are here discussing democracy, it's also because we hope that there is another way around, so that grassroots movements, think tanks, citizens, assemblies and projects can move forward things even beyond or without crisis. Or that at least there is some hope from us, and this is a reason for getting involved. So, Valerie, do you want to add something? Other comments? Please, Marty, we should have a microphone. We should. Otherwise, yeah, there.
Thank you. Well, just thank you very much for all the presentations. They were extremely interesting. Just one short comment maybe on the presentation from our Dutch colleague. I found very, very interesting the notion of European serpentines. I hope this will have a future. I do believe that the future of Europe lies in a great deal on the regions and the potential of the regions. That being said, I think it would be more appropriate maybe if the European serpentines don't try to, let's say, replace or substitute the existing regional structures or legitimacies. I think it is better to start the process of, say, without defining the shape of the actors, and let that, in a way, be arranged by itself in a totum revolutum, let's say, which has some risks, of course, but I see no other way than shaping those sub-state actors as we go, let's say, because otherwise there is the risk of becoming too stiff, too rigid, and then there's also the risk of regions mimicking the nation states in their behavior, of trying to act as they were like new versions of nation states and reproducing some of the, let's say, shortcomings of a state-based governance, let's say. But that being said, I think it's an extremely compelling idea. Myself being from Barcelona and Euro regions, yes, I mean, Euro regions, in a way, I think started this with great potential. Then, of course, maybe they didn't live up to its promises. But here we go with a new generation of ideas. So I think that is something to certainly to be explored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty. Jan, do you want to reply?
Briefly, I fully agree, and that's why I mentioned that these interregions, these subplans, should not be called into existence, but should grow organically. And there will always be a variety of actors, and within that variety, also existing administrative structures can have a place, of course. They are one of a series, and at some point when they notice that the pressure of the crisis, I would say pressure comes from the bottom up and comes from civil society at large, then I think those local and regional governments should change their attitude from initiating to being responsive, becoming a facilitating agency. And when that happens, you know, they're automatically part of the show. So in that organic growth process, all forms, I think, can and will take shape. And I'm absolutely sure that new constellations will be invented in the north compared to the south of Europe, and the east, you know, and there's room for that, you know, let it happen. In a way, it goes far beyond the scope of this conference, and we certainly do not have time for it. It will be very interesting to compare this set of ideas with how Europe has been shapen up in medieval times and the ages thereafter, when we had a series of smaller entities of city-states, and they were growing organically, and they were changing over time, and there were coalitions, you know, all these things were happening. And to a certain extent, I think that will be the future for Europe. And we will not have to be too rigid in terms of definition of borders, but allow for organic growth and facilitate cooperation rather than definition of borderlines. When that starts to happen, I think we have a lot of scope. We will be talking about that this afternoon, I think, but again, no time for it now. But we live in modern times, and to a certain extent you can define our times as the upcoming of a digital society. Digital society is coming with a range of new instruments to facilitate this process. That will be very interesting to combine new technologies with new ideas about geographical organization. That's a challenge that I think should as well be taken up. But in essence, I agree with your remark, organic growth.
Thank you, Jan. And then we have a 5 minutes break before the next session. Thank you all for your attention.